Good morning, folks. Welcome to December 9th Fireside Chat. I've been having a conversation with some people on Facebook with whom I keep contact about the current situation in the U.S. and how it impacts the rest of the world. They took umbrage with me because I am aware, as someone who sees things in their context, of how America impacts the world. What happens in America will definitely happen later in Canada. And there's a reason for that. And one of the reasons that things are happening in America along the identical lines that they were in 1861 is because America is forgetting her own history. I was told that it wasn't necessary to look at the foundations of a building to determine where the cracks in said structure were. But of course, I reject that premise because I know that all ideas are based on past ideas. All evolution of ideas should occur evolutionary, never revolutionary. So we need to look at where we have broken faith with the inheritance we received from our ancestors of law, order, and good governance to maintain public peace. Okay? There is no disassociating the present from the past and saying, here we are, and we just magically arrived here, and the ideas which are currently affecting society have no history, they just happened. I reject all of these ideas for the simple reason that, well, first of all, they're not factual, and they're so simplistic and useless that they do not give us any ability to look at what has gone wrong, why, how it went wrong, where it went wrong, and what we can do to rectify it. So let's examine what is happening today and why it resembles 1861. First of all, the Democrats have exchanged one form of identitarian politics for another. The Democrats have always practiced some form of race identification. In 1861, it was the belief that blacks were inferior and that they needed to be subjugated to their white overlords. And in 2020, it's that black folks, Hispanics, whatever minority race you might identify with, or sexual identity that they deem to be oppressed, that only they can provide rectification for past societal wrongs. Once again, by breaking humanity down by race, by creed, by color, by belief system, by inclination. Whereas the Democrats, or rather, I should say the Republicans, largely have been happy to live under common law and keep Lady Justice's blindfold on and view all people as equal before the law and do ignore their personal identity and whatever multiple intersectional identity groups to which they might belong. Through cultural Marxism and its latest evolution of postmodernism, the left has hijacked this identitarian aspect of the Democratic Party because the left sees everyone as an extension of whatever group to which they belong. That's why in Marxism, it was the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie. You were guilty by virtue of being a member of a group or innocent by virtue of being a member of a group. Whereas people that believe in individual sovereignty care nothing for such things. They view each individual as sovereign and accountable. And they view their rights as inherent and God-given. Those are the good ideas that inoculated the West against the bad ideas of social collectivism. Of course, in 1861, it led to the American Civil War, which spilled over into Canada. I grew up in St. Catharines, which was indeed the end of the Freedom Railroad. Harriet Tubman lived in my town, who was Moses to her people. And the effects of that war came to St. Catharines. Our local hotel on Ontario Street, which was a spa back at that time, was a hotbed of spy activity during the Civil War. And throughout the entire Civil War, America threatened us with invasion if we didn't cooperate with whichever party, the South or the North, that they deemed to be appropriate. Of course, many Canadians did go and serve in the Northern Army because they hated slavery and thought it was an abomination, which of course it is. These problems didn't go away. When I was a child, I used to fly out to Washington via Buffalo to visit my aunt and uncle and cousins who lived near Washington. And at that airport in Buffalo, black folks were only washroom attendants and baggage handlers. And as a little wee kid, I was horrified. They had separate fountains, too. I was horrified, and I asked my mother, what the heck is going on here? And fortunately, I had a mother who could tell me what was going on. It was identity politics. This has always been the division between the left and the right. And now that division has been appropriated by postmodern cultural Marxists who are using it as a means to install cultural Marxism into our society. The only way that we can inoculate ourselves against such lies is by inoculating ourselves with good ideas. Good ideas inoculate us against the naivety that allows us to fall prey to social collectivism and identity politics. Dr. Gad Saad has this wonderful anagram, DIE, diversity, inclusiveness, and equity. It's the triumvirate of this mantra foisted on us by the radical left. Of course, diversity only exists on the level of the individual. There are more differences between people as individuals than there are between groups of individuals. And if you're looking for a persecuted minority, you don't need to look any further than the sovereign person. Okay? And we have a long history in Britain of establishing a legal system that would prevent such prejudices. Of course, America is an inheritor of that legal system, which is why she uses common law. There is not a moment that goes by where the left does not try to deconstruct America's Constitution. And there's not a day that goes by when I read from both the left and the right the most idiotic, simplistic, useless solutions to what is in fact a multivariate complex problem that literally lies at the center of how a person views the world. As much good as President Trump has done, the fact remains that he still can't construct a sentence correctly in the English language. Trump is not going to save us. And if this election turns out the way that it is looking, and the Supreme Court fails to come to any reasonable conclusions about this failed voting process in the states, which he was obviously unable to secure, he could not secure the voting process from corruption, which he'd promised he would do. If that happens and Biden wins, whatever happens in the states will happen here. I've said it over and over again. When you're a large mouse, because Canada's the mouse, there's only some 33 million of us, where there's almost 340 million Americans. who control most of our industry and our media. And since her media is being controlled by the postmodern left, all Canadians are hearing are rot. And this rot is a mind worm that is impacting both of our countries, which will impact the world. Not because of Canada. Canada just becomes the first victim of this mind rot. When the cultural Marxists back in the 30s knew they had to flee Germany because Hitler wouldn't tolerate them, they came to American universities and injected cultural Marxism into all the major universities in the US. And they also helped found the CIA. And when you add that together with America's idea of manifest destiny and of the Monroe Doctrine, you end up with a nation that will pursue its own interests at the detriment of all else, including its own citizens. And by that I mean the elite in charge of the nation will pursue their own interests, which is, of course, exactly what you see now in Canada. We have a postmodern cultural Marxist elite in charge of this nation that have literally told us they're going to reset our economy and reset social interaction in this country. Both of our nations are in crisis, and there's only one thing that's going to fix it, and it ain't Trump. Bad thoughts are pathological, and they're destroying society. And good thoughts inoculate us from it. We better find out who we are and what the foundations of our liberty are, and return to them and resurrect them in such a way that they're useful today so that they can evolve and not devolve. That is my dire warning, and I stand by this prophecy, and I'll be here to remind you I said it as things go to hell in a handbasket. Hope you're having a great Christmas. Fortsatt god jul.